Recording in progress.
Just to check, I see there are two interpreters. That means what we say will be interpreted simultaneously, so we should speak slowly and very clearly. Okay.
The colleagues are very professional. You can speak in your regular tempo, basically.
Okay. Great.
So
and we know that from EU meetings with 1 million translators and interpreters.
Oh, wow.
Ask us.
Yeah. And also, like, the colleagues in Shanghai will let the audience in a few minutes already, because the interpreters have to set up and some other colleagues. So I think in about 2 minutes, we will be quiet as well. And Judith and I will also switch off the cameras. Then we put on the title slide and then start at 15 past sharp, more or less, I think. I'll give you the cue again, Nasreen, if that's okay.
I did my best to finish at 11, but...
Wow, you were like so on the spot. I felt sorry that we had to cut some of the questions, but like it was a nice session. I liked it. So like really like on the second you closed it. It was great.
I'm a hard taskmaster.
You are. Yeah, it was a lot of speakers. So,
yeah. But I think this session we may be able to go maybe 5 minutes over.
That's fine here because you don't have a follow-up. If
okay.
I think 5 minutes, if this is fine for everybody from the speakers here. If you don't have an appointment right afterwards, we could do that. We can also see what kind of questions are coming through from the audience and play it by ear a little bit.
Perfect. Ashwani hasn't joined yet, but he's third up, so he does have a little bit of time.
I drop him a message.
Hi, Judith.
Hi, Nasreen. Sorry, I haven't said anything. I was just jumping from one session to the other, making sure the other one, everything is fine on the other as well. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys have been
congrats
really busy.
Yeah, congrats on the previous session. Yeah, only one to go now. I know you have two, of course. Tomorrow you also have to be there as a moderator.
I've had 4 this week. Well, tomorrow will be 4.
I hope you have a long weekend in Switzerland. I don't know if you have that on the 1st. No? Oh, sorry to hear that.
Switzerland has 9 public holidays for the year.
9, yeah. I counted it the other day. We have 12 to 14.
Yeah, in South Africa has about the same, 12 to 14. So I've lost out on a few leave days.
It happens.
start now. Thank you, Nasreen.
A warm welcome to our live audience in Shanghai, to our virtual audience joining us from around the globe. We are very excited to welcome you to the third and final panel in the apprenticeship track this morning, where we will showcase tools to assess apprenticeship systems. My name is Nasreen Mani. I am the Executive Director of the Global Apprenticeship Network, and I'm pleased to moderate this session with very eminent speakers from the European Commission, the International Labour Organization, the British Council, and from World Didac. We're very keen to understand in this morning's session how we can go about implementing and maintaining apprenticeship systems, which by nature are very complex. They're not limited to just policy. We need to give effect to the policy in practice. So we need tools to ensure that all of the stakeholders who are involved in the delivery of training and the quality assurance bodies, the stakeholder bodies, can work within the legal and regulatory frameworks. We need to ensure that the diverse stakeholders, from employers to trade unions, to government, to delivery partners, are all able to coordinate their work and to cooperate with one another, very importantly. So what are these tools that can help policymakers and practitioners evaluate systems and create these effective apprenticeship programs? Today's session will highlight 3 different tools, and we will look at the Selfie tool for workplace digital learning from the European Commission, the British Council benchmarking tool, and the ILO toolbox for apprenticeship, for quality apprenticeships. We'll understand the perspective of these different organizations, and very importantly, understand how to align and build these tools in to evaluate the systems and to build the quality delivery aspect within the system. I'm very pleased to welcome our 4 panelists. We have Peter Monari Joseph, who is the World Didac Ambassador for Africa and a technical delegate to WorldSkills Kenya. Chris Cooper, the Principal Consultant for TVET at the British Council. Ashwani Agarwal, who is the Team Lead for Work-Based Learning, Apprenticeships, RPL, and Core Skills, the ILO, the International Labour Organization, and Tim Schreiber, who is a Policy Officer, Skills for the Young in the Vocational Education and Training Unit at the EU Commission. So let us start this morning's session as we delve into these tools. We hope that this will be a practical session where you as the audience can take tips away, you can learn some good practice, and that you can follow up with our speakers post the event if you need more information. In terms of housekeeping, we invite you to put your questions into the Q&A box on your Zoom screen. And please note that there is simultaneous translation in English and Chinese. You simply have to choose the translation tab on your screen. So can I please hand over now to Chris Cooper from the British Council. And Chris is going to expand on the use of the British Council assessment and benchmarking tool. We'll get a deep dive and some practical guidance on the toolkit and how is the British Council supporting countries to develop action plans to give effect to the toolkit. So Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Nasreen. Yes, as Nasreen said, I want to share a tool which we think will be of interest really to any country looking at enhancing its apprenticeship system. And the tool is very much, that we've developed, is very much looking at the whole system, not just parts of it. So it's very much a systemic assessment tool. As has been discussed over the last few days, apprenticeships are increasingly an important source of skills and employment. And we've seen this not only in the UK, where they've moved more and more central to government policy, but also in countries where apprenticeships are newer and where older systems are being reinvigorated. As a cultural relations organisation, the British Council believes that skill systems are more effective when they're developed in collaboration and where challenges are shared. So we therefore set out to develop a tool which would support this collaboration and help countries address the challenges associated with enhancing their apprenticeship systems. In developing sorry, do you want to just move to the next slides? In developing the tool, we're very conscious of a number of things. Firstly, that whilst many apprenticeship systems have very similar attributes, they're very different in different places. And the tool needs to be useful whether the country has a mature apprenticeship system or consists mainly of informal apprenticeships, or whether the apprenticeships and TVET is devolved to states, or whether maybe there's apprenticeship systems covering different parts of sectors, covering different sectors. So that was one thing that we were very very mindful of in developing an assessment and benchmarking tool. We're also very clear that this wasn't about promoting a single approach to apprenticeships or saying that one country was better than another. As we all know, context matters, and the tool really doesn't want to say this is the way you should do it. It's about helping countries to identify where other countries may be doing something of interest and adapting it, helping you adapt it to your own situation. However, the content of the tool does align with the work of others. And in developing the tool, we worked with ILO and GAN and the countries that we piloted it in to make sure that it was relevant to their needs, but also to the ILO standards, for example, that Ashrani mentioned in the previous presentation. We move on to the tool itself. There's no point me actually sharing you the tool in detail because, as you can see, it's 220 questions, and that would be a bit dull. But just to give a bit of an outline, in developing the tool, we were trying to get a balance between it being very comprehensive, so make sure it covered the whole of the system, but also actually the outcome was useful. So it wasn't too broad brush that didn't come out with actions that you could take forward, but also wasn't too unwieldy to use. So we've developed this tool. It's online. It's available for anybody to use, and it's got 3 parts to the framework. It covers policy, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. And within that, there's 14 sections. So it covers just about all aspects of an apprenticeship system in a country. The other important thing to highlight is that, as I say, the tool's online. You can fill it in, and it comes out at the end with analysis of how your responses compare to those of other countries. That's automatically generated, so it's there for anybody to use whenever they like. What we would say, though, is we wouldn't recommend that anybody goes and sits in a dark room and fills in the questions themselves. The whole point of the questions are to bring stakeholders together to get a holistic view and different perspectives on the answer. And that's how you can find out whether you think the system's actually doing what you think it is doing. So, as I said, the tool has been developed, but actually it's also been piloted. If we move on to the next slide, this is how we recommend that you use the tool. So we've called it an assessment and a benchmarking tool. So the first job is to actually use the tool to assess your own system. And of course, the first question is, what system are you going to assess? Because in some countries, there's more than one. It may be, as in India, the different provinces have devolved, so they're all slightly different. In Malaysia, another country that we piloted it in, actually there were different apprenticeship systems for different sectors. And in Ghana, for example, they've got a more of an informal apprenticeship system. So first of all is to work out what you're going to assess, but then also to bring stakeholders together to do the assessment. And it's worth saying that a lot of the questions are actually binary. There's not many where you sit on the fence, and that's deliberate, really, because it helps people to really just bring together and discuss whether they think it's true or not. We also try and encourage the questions to be answered based on evidence where possible. And as a result of that process, it's possible for a country to identify where they think the gaps or the challenges are in their apprenticeship system and where they maybe would like to focus in the future. Then the second part of the process is to actually benchmark it and to look at what others are doing in other countries. As I said, the tool produces an output which shows how your own country compares with those of the others that have completed the task. And those that did that found that it was really helpful in terms of identifying what other people are doing, particularly in the areas where your assessment has identified priorities or things that you want to consider further. It also helps you to assess whether you think what you've said is realistic. And when you've said yes or no, is that what other people have thought, and is it realistic? And also, where can you learn from, and who can you learn from? Even if they've got different contexts and the system is very different in other aspects, there might be specific things that countries are implementing that's useful. And finally, one of the big benefits is it identifies what the common challenges are across countries in terms of implementing and improving apprenticeship systems. And I'll talk a bit about that next. Finally, when we piloted, we did. Sorry, when we piloted it, we did have some time to actually do the actions, and this was one of the most important things. There's no good developing a tool that just sits on the web and sits on the shelf and nobody does anything with it. So we managed to, we've piloted it in 5 countries, the action orientated bit. And what we found was that the tool actually resulted in almost like a work plan of how to, or an approach of how the apprenticeship system in each country can be improved. And some of the things that came out of that was, for example, in Ghana, where actually there was a very informal apprenticeship system. But as a result of what they've now got the first formal apprenticeship policy, and they used the tool as a sort of a framework for developing that policy. The other thing that came out quite a lot was that there was an assumption that people in the apprenticeships, different parts of the apprenticeship system, did things, and actually it wasn't clear to all those in the apprenticeship system what their roles were. So there was some clarification of that. And the other key action was around communication with employers, and the employers understanding the benefits of an apprenticeship system, but also how they can access the system. And that was some of the projects, that's part of the projects that came out in Malaysia. So hopefully you can see from that there were some really very practical outcomes for the countries that took part in the project. And we've now got outcomes from 9 countries on the system. As I said, one of the other benefits is identifying what are the common challenges. And if you look at the outputs from the tool, which is the next slide, we can see some of the trends that are coming through. So if you look at it, so just a couple of the messages really. So there's real evidence of positive outcomes from apprenticeships. So if you're a policy maker and you're just trying to decide whether you really want to look at your apprenticeship system and spend any time in looking at improving it or reviewing it, and I think the answer is yes. I mean, even just from the small number of countries that participated, in every country, at least 25% of apprenticeships get employed, and in most countries, it's over 50%. So that's not a bad employment rate from a vocational activity. In every country, progression to higher education is possible. So there's that real progression, and in some countries even measure sustainable employment and income growth. So there is some real evidence of positive outcomes, and therefore really you could say it's worth looking at. In terms of finance, each countries have mixed financial mechanisms, and the tool doesn't say one way is better than another. People are funded through levies or not, and there are incentives for different groups, and that's really down to the country system to work out what is best. But over half are saying the funding system isn't sustainable, and over half have also said they haven't measured public return on investment. So there's some difference there, and you're saying it's not sustainable, but then you haven't really looked at the returns of that investment. So there's obviously some challenges there and some thinking that needs to be done and shared. And then a final point where there's some interest is 75% of the countries said they've got good quality trainers, capacity and resources. So overall, the system has the right people to deliver, but actually in some areas, there is still some shortage of people to undertake the training, off the job training and apprenticeships. And that may be because of the sector, it's difficult to get people in the sector. So there is a common issue there in making an apprenticeship system comprehensive across all the occupations. So just going on to the last slide and finishing off now. How can the toolkit help you? Well, it can undertake a whole system review and identify where to improve it, irrespective of the maturity of your system. We've piloted the project in Scotland, in South Africa, in Malaysia, India, Pakistan, and Ghana, where there actually was a very impressive. So we've piloted in many different contexts, and it's been found to be helpful. It's actually a really useful tool for engaging social partners and getting consensus. I think, as we all know, this is probably the most difficult thing in vocational education, is how do you engage employers and get consensus in a system? And this is actually a tool to bring people together to discuss what's going on, the reality of what's going on, but also agree some actual action. And that's always a way of bringing people together. It helps you identify what other countries are doing, and where they're doing things of relevance to you. So it's a way of sharing and understanding what other people are doing that may help you in your own country. It's also very much links to what's coming next, in that what we're doing is helping to develop an action plan. It's what do you need to do to improve your system? And I think the things that will come next from ILO and from the EU are tools to help about the how. Okay, having identified what you want to do, these are things that are going to help you do them. And finally, this is more of a call to action, really. As I've just indicated in the previous slide, the more people that fill the tool out, the better information we have about apprenticeships internationally. And by pulling them together, we can help the international community identify specific challenges and solutions within the apprenticeship system. And wouldn't it be great if next year we come to Shanghai and have a session which is really focused on the challenges that you've identified, but also some of the solutions that you've implemented using some of the tools we are presenting here today. So just finally, if you want to find out more, you can contact me, Google British Council Apprenticeship Tool, and have a look at it. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris. That was a really great way to start. And I appreciate the link to Tim's presentation and Ashwani's presentation. You've set the scene in terms of the what. We're going to learn a little bit more now about the how. I was very appreciative of the cognizance you've given to the fact that country context is different, and this is not a one size fits all. It's really a set of questions that can shape the system and respond to the individual country or regional needs. So thank you for that. Let's move on now to Tim. Tim Schreiber from the EU is going to present the Selfie tool for work-based learning. And Tim, what we want to hear from you today is, what are the key features? How accessible is the tool? How do we use the tool in practice? And how can the tool help us to improve our use of digital technologies for teaching and learning? So thank you very much, Tim. We look forward to your contribution.
Thank you very much, Nazreen, and thanks a lot for the invitation to present the brand new Selfie for Work-Based Learning tool, which we just launched earlier this month. So this is the first official event where I can present it. The Selfie for Work-Based Learning tool is a self-assessment tool for vet schools and training companies to assess how well they use digital tools and methods in their learning. On the next slide, we see some of the main reasons why we decided to develop this tool. Please go to the next slide. Thanks. So one reason, of course, was the COVID-19 pandemic, which caused a massive shift to online technologies and remote connections across the whole education and training system, but particularly in VET. With its work-based learning element, of course, it was a special challenge for training companies to keep their apprentices, to keep paying their apprentices in times of closures, of partial shutdowns. This was one reason. Then on the other hand, let's say the more long-term trend is that we still see in the EU that more than 40% of the adult population does not have basic digital skills. Basic digital skills is, for example, to send an email or to be able to participate in a video conference like we do today. And we think that given the importance of the digital transition, this is a far too high share, of course, of the population. That's why we have set EU-wide the target that by 2025, 70% of European adults should have at least basic digital skills and 80% by 2030. Now, looking at the figure above, 42% still do not have these skills, which means we need to reduce this share by 22 percentage points until 2030, which is a big challenge and where vocational education and training will play a key role. That's why in one of the main legislative texts that we adopted on EU level, the so-called Council Recommendation on Vocational Education and Training, we wrote clearly that we will support qualitative and effective digitalization of that provision, including European self-assessment tools such as the Selfie. On the next slide, you will see that the Selfie for Work-Based Learning tool did not emerge from nothing. There was already, for the last 3 years, a Selfie tool which was developed for schools in general to assess their digitalization. There has been a tremendous uptake of this tool with now more than 1.7 million users who have used the tool, more than 13,000 schools. And also, I think very important in the context of WorldSkills, 82 countries that have used the tool. So you see this goes far beyond the 27 EU member states and has been really used widely also beyond the EU. On the next slide, you will see what is the novelty with the new extension for work-based learning. It is part of the Selfie tool and integrated into it. The Selfie tool as such is free and customizable because you asked about accessibility. So it's completely free of cost, and you can also customize it to your need. At the moment, it is only available in all 24 official languages, however, including languages such as English, French, and Spanish. And it gathers 4 perspectives. So the traditional Selfie tool that has been around for 3 years already had the perspectives of school leaders, school teachers, and learners. And what the new work-based learning tool adds is a 4th perspective, namely that of in-company trainers. That also means that in vet systems that are entirely relying on school-based systems, the Selfie tool can be used. However, in systems that also rely on apprenticeships, now there is another option and extension to also include the companies through the in-company trainers. Very concretely, the way the tool works is that all these 4 groups fill in questionnaires that are customized. And then as a result of this exercise, there is an internal report that is created for the schools, assessing clearly the strengths and weaknesses of digital learning and training based on the answers to these questionnaires. On the next slide, you will see the different areas of the questions that are covered by the work-based learning extension. You see that it's both about hardware, for example, infrastructure and equipment, support and resources. It's about the teaching, the implementation in the classroom, the assessment practices, for example, about a focus on students, on their digital competence, but also about collaboration and networking. We heard from Chris before how important that is in the context of apprenticeships. So it's also a lot about collaboration between the schools and the companies. And of course, leadership, because what we see is that very often the decision to go digital depends on strong leadership, on proactive leadership, on both on the side of the schools, but also on the side of the companies. On the next slide, you will see some examples what these questions are that in-company trainers receive when they participate in the exercise to make it a bit more concrete. In general, the Selfie tool always uses a ranking from 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest rating and 5 the highest rating. And one example is the statement in our company, there are digital devices for me to use for training. So this relates to infrastructure and equipment. And then the in-company trainer participating can rate from 1, meaning that there are no digital devices to use for training, and up to 5, where in the view of the trainer, there is a very good availability of digital devices. Another example is that as a company, we are involved in the development of the school's digital strategy. So here it's clearly about the collaboration between the training company and the vet school, how much the company is involved in the school's digital strategic work. But there are also questions about the implementation in the classroom, for example, like I use digital technologies to foster students' creativity. So not only do I use digital technologies, yes or no, but really with a specific focus to use digital technologies to make training better and to improve the quality of the training. And last but not least, for example, when it's about the students' focus, in our company, students learn coding or programming. So there it's really about assessing whether core digital skills are actually taught as part of the apprenticeship. On the next slide, you will see that we have piloted this new extension, this new Selfie for Work-Based Learning before we launched it this month. We ran a pilot in 9 countries, 5 EU member states and 4 countries outside the EU. And the responses we got, the feedback was very positive. There was a need to involve companies more. As you can see, the highest number of participants are students. Because naturally, if you involve a whole school community, the highest share of people of headcount are the students. But of course, teachers, headmasters, and in-company trainers were also involved in these pilots. In total, 30,000 people participated in these pilots. And then on the next slide, you can see that we launched the tool with the participation of our commissioner, Mr. Schmidt, at the Selfie Forum earlier this month. Also widening the scope, discussing about the usage of digital technologies in general in education and training, and the importance really to make sure that vet schools are also a driver of digitalization, because of course the digital transformation is very fast, and we know that education and training systems sometimes lag a bit behind of this development. So we think that it's also really a fruitful collaboration between companies who sometimes are further already when it comes to digitalization and the vet schools to work really together to make sure that the digital skills are taught that are needed on the labor market of the future. And then on the next slide, I would like to finish with some key messages about what the Selfie for Work-Based Learning tool is and what it is not. So first of all, it helps you to better understand where you stand. So really using this tool, participating in the exercise is a starting point of a process. You identify your strengths and more importantly, your weaknesses, but whether actual change follows and whether the identified weaknesses are somehow tackled then depends on the follow-up, on whether the vet providers, the schools, the training companies are willing to follow up. Also, what are the context factors? What are the government strategies? There again, we think there is a clear link to the meta level that Chris presented before. The tool is about stimulating dialogue between the vet providers, between the vet schools and the training companies about how to best work together to equip learners with digital skills. When we talked with users under the pilot exercise, we often heard that, of course, it's first of all short-term extra workload for the teachers who have to run the exercise, for the companies who do not have a lot of time for such kind of extra activities. But we think that the long-term benefit of really taking the time and analyzing where you stand is worth the extra workload in the short term. And then finally, promotion is key. Therefore, I'm very grateful to be here today because we see very often that there is a low number of vet schools that are very advanced digitally that like to participate in such kind of exercises. But actually, the schools and the companies we need to reach are those that do not automatically participate in such exercises and that really need some support and some encouragement really to move ahead on their way of digitalization. And if you want to find more information about the tool, you can see on the last slide 2 links leading first to our Selfie website. So for all schools who would like to participate there, you can register, you can participate in the exercise, and at the bottom you see a link to a press release that we published as part of the launch of the new tool. And I'm looking forward to your questions. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tim. And I think it's really fantastic to see that as much as this is a tool that has been developed by the Commission, the accessibility and use is beyond the borders of Europe. So it's good to engage and learn and share with different countries. I think it's very good to see the very rapid response to COVID, to understand what is happening in the system and the ability to assess what we're doing. The other opportunities that I found is that it's a very practical tool. It asks the real questions, and there's the 3 levels of individual, organizational, and then the collaborative approach. So it addresses the systemic issues as well as the solutions that you can rapidly implement at a company or an organizational level. So thank you so much. It's good to see this agility and the opportunity to respond to this very fast changing education and labor market landscape. So wonderful to hear from you, Tim. And now over to Ashwani Agarwal, who's going to share the ILO's Toolkit for Quality Apprenticeships. Ashwani, you're going to take us through it. I know it's a big tool, so you'll take us through part of it, and you'll provide a high-level overview and then some very practical steps that practitioners can take from at least one part of the toolkit. So over to you, Ashwani.
Thank you very much, Nazreen. I will start from, I think, from the Chris and Tim has done. So basically, all these tools complement very well each other. So I will first request to show the slides, please. Thank you. So basically, my presentation starts from the last session where where we were discussing about the potential of apprenticeship, but as well as the challenges faced by the countries in establishing quality apprenticeships. So based on that one, the requirements, when the question we were getting how to do that one. So this is as part of our efforts to support countries, how they can establish quality apprenticeship systems and programs. So the volume 1 is for the policymaker in terms of setting up the right laws and regulations and the systems, and volume 2 is for the practitioners who are involved in the designing and implementing programs, apprenticeship programs. Next slide, please. And as we have discussed in the last session, it's basically background is that yes, apprenticeships are very, very important tool for providing demand-driven skills. Next slide, please. But at the same time, next slide, please. But at the same time, the countries are facing challenges. So what they do, basically, I'm just slightly making slightly more interesting. Otherwise, on online sessions, it could be very sometimes boring for the participants to keep on listening. So first, normally tendencies of many countries are that they do policy borrowing from a developed country who has a well-established apprenticeship system. And it happens both ways. They demand also, and sometimes there are countries also who promote their own systems also. But then, do you think this works? Many research studies of those, some countries have already shown that replicating a country's system which works very well in one country doesn't necessarily work in another country. So then next please. Then some countries, they do it. Okay, then they try to reinvent the complete wheel. So, and we all know that it is a very time-consuming process. Why we need to reinvent everything? So, most important lesson from this is that it is policy learning is more important than borrowing or copying. Means you can always, there are good practices, examples, tools are there world over. One can always learn from elements, understanding what works and what doesn't work in what context. From those things can be taken to the other country, but not as a wholesale system. With that in view, what we did, we developed the toolkits. So toolkit basically, next slide, please. So these toolkits, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So basically, how ILO supports countries, just to show that one is that we develop international standards and innovative global products. We also support countries in reforming or developing their national policy and systems, developing programs, implementing programs, promoting networking, knowledge sharing, building their capacity, and benchmarking. Now, as part of that process, we started working on the toolkit on apprenticeship, as I mentioned, both for the policymakers and practitioners. Now, here what we did is that we did an extensive, worldwide research on that one. Of course, some of those who are panelists who are sitting here, they also contributed. Every one of them has contributed with this one who are sitting there. And then many more people contributed. So we collected, analyzed what things works in what country, what are the good practices, and which ones could be set some kind of an example, not as a system as a whole, but we also provided in what context it has worked. So that is better to learn from that one and then adapt suitably to the other's country. So we took a different approach, neither copying completely system or recommending, but nor also recommending to countries to reinvent everything. Go through that whole cycle what others have already experienced. So all the material which is under this one, tools, knowledge, yes, it is, some of this is purely of the ILO, which ILO has developed during the, supporting various countries around the world, but a lot of them are also from other countries and organizations. For example, here you have it, I can see, for example, British Council is here, European Commission is there, GAN is there. So we used also there, whatever they have developed in the past. So some of these things are also there, but from all over the country. But what we also did, maybe, next slide, please. So basically, again, I was just saying, these are the two toolkits, volume 1 and volume 2. And I will also share the link on your chat. I'm just posting this one in case you want to download. You can go and click there, and then you will be finding. And then in this, on the same website, you have a digital version of this toolkit, which combines the two toolkits also. And that one we keep on updating all the time with the new tools and methodology. For example, today, when the EC has shown the Selfie tool, so next stage, what we are going to do, once this is launched, we will add also in the digital version also. For example, what tool Chris has shown, that has also been listed in the digital version also. It gives a reference of that one also. So what is these toolkits are there? They are very practical hands-on guide. It's not a just academic paper, no. So it gives you a step-by-step approach how you can set up the system or the program. And then most importantly, we only didn't depend on the developed countries' systems, because we know that context in the low-income country, middle-income countries are different. So we also did a lot of work in identifying some good practices and tools from all types of country. And then there you can see there are examples from more than 50 countries covering all regions of the world. There you will find tools from America, Southern America, Africa, Asia, Europe, all over the world, and all income country level, countries with all income levels. Next, please. So basically, toolkit, what we have come up with, this is a new approach we developed, is that we recommend 6 building blocks. Next, please. Please just click on that one. Which 6 building blocks on the quality apprenticeships. These are what you can see on the screen. The social dialogue is very important. Robust regulatory framework with clear roles and responsibility of all the stakeholders. Equitable funding arrangements. We have used the word equitable is very important. It means that how people benefit, different stakeholder benefit, the cost should also be in proportion to that one also. It should not be just only one stakeholder bear all the cost and other stakeholder only bears the benefit. Then it is not a sustainable system, apprenticeship system. It has to be strong labor market relevance, means at the end of the training, the skills acquired should meet the labor market demand, and then they should be getting the jobs also, employment also. Inclusiveness is always very important, diversity and everything, inclusiveness. Next, please. Now for the toolkit 2, okay, just this one slide is showing the toolkit 2 has a modular design. In fact, it is a 7 booklets, which you can download as a single volume. You can download different volumes also. Next, please. Then for the toolkit 2, for the apprenticeship programs, Then we design apprenticeship training life cycle, which has 4 stages. This first one is that developing apprenticeship program, preparing quality training places, organizing training, and then not stopping at the training. Means then post-training transitions and evaluations are also very important. Where, for example, you'll find that example of the tools which has been presented by Chris, or when we add next from the EC's tool of the Selfie, so you'll find in the evaluation basically how you can evaluate these kind of various systems and programs. Now, each of these stages, these are broad stages. Each of them has their detail of the processes involved. Overall, there are 17 processes involved out there. So, for example, so each one is more explained in details. I'll not go into details here, but you can see from the toolkit also. Next slide, please. And the most importantly, what we also give a special emphasis on digital technology and innovation. This is a very interesting what we did a lot. This is not normally available in the existing literature. We did a lot of work and spent a lot of investment of the time and money in finding very good tools which can be used by apprenticeships programs in improving their effectiveness and efficiency, and also how apprenticeships are contributing to digital skills also. Next, please. And I'm very glad to inform you, more than 50 countries are currently using these versions for the toolkit. And many of the countries have already translated in these toolkits in their own languages also. And we are quite open to that one. If a country asks us that they want to translate, we allow. We give them original text and details, and we allow them to translate to their own languages. With this one, I would like to say thank you. This is a good opportunity. I'm not going to details of this one, but just to provide an overview of the toolkits. Thank you.
Ashwani, thank you so much for that very, very useful demonstration of the toolkits, the value that the kits offer. I think it's both the systemic issues in toolkit 1 that you touched. The building blocks are very useful, and as much as we've spoken about the need for understanding the country context, I think the tools that you've put forward are available to be able to customize for customization in each country. It's not a one-size-fits-all model. I'm very appreciative to each of the speakers who've highlighted that, you know, we need to take the different context into play, very, very helpful. And thank you for sharing your contact details. I'm sure there will be participants who will be in touch post the conference. So we're going to ask Peter Monari Joseph now to come in. And Peter, you've listened to the 3 participants. You've listened to Chris, Tim, and Ashwani share the tools that are available. So from a Kenyan perspective and from a World Didact perspective, how do you find that the tools can help to create a responsive vocational education and training system, knowing that some countries are more advanced in their systems than others? How do you see these offering opportunities for systemic growth, for alignment, and for improvement?
Thank you, Nasreen, and thank you for the 3 presentations that I've had from ILO, European Union, and the British Council. The tools are very responsible because they have guided many countries, for specifically Kenya, to establish what we call the national frameworks for creating apprenticeship systems. Number 2, they have led to the creation of strong social partnerships, because most of the tools that have been showcased here, they are involved with the private sector. So there is strong partnership between the public and the industry to ensure that there is in-company training with the private sector and the training from the schools. Number 2, they have also increased the ways in which governments give tokens to various companies, because the companies that are training the students from schools, they are also given opportunities to be able to participate in the policy and frameworks of the apprenticeship systems. There is also empirical evidence on the costs and benefits that underpin the policy choices. There's also what we call employer-focused financial incentive within the apprenticeship policies, And also there is frameworks that enable the students, the stakeholders who are involved in the system to have a flexible system in which every stakeholder to be able to participate in the formation of frameworks, in the formation of policies. It has also led to the creation of curriculum competence, which is also being used to ensure that whatever is being trained in schools is also what the industry has. Lastly, whatever the tools have showcased is that there is what we call employer-focused financial innocence, as I've said. There's also what we call choosing the right partner, so that the policies that are created from the apprenticeship systems are not misused. So the bringing of together of various stakeholders increases ways of which the tools can be used across countries. And I'm very happy to hear that the tools are open to every country, from the funding development partners to African continent, where we can be able to use the tools to practice what we call the dual vocational system, which has been used in the European side, and Africa is now following a number of the areas in which we can be able to cooperate with the industry to ensure that dual vocational training is easily accessed in Africa. Thank you.
Wonderful, Peter, and thank you for that. I think your last point, the accessibility of the tools, is so important. And I'm very grateful that each one of these tools is widely available. You know, you simply need an internet connection and you can download. On that point, the WorldSkills partners will also make links to the 3 tools available on the WorldSkills conference website. So participants will be able to see that by the end of the session. I think, you know, the other points about improving public and private sector relationships is so important to the success of a viable apprenticeship system, and the tools are giving us, one, the opportunity to analyze the state of the relationships, and then suggested ways to improve those relationships. So each one builds on the other, and, you know, even though they were developed independently, it's good to see the alignment and how they can be used collectively. So thank you for your input. And I have one more question for you, Peter. What are the elements of the tools that we could use in countries where there's still a stigma towards apprenticeships? And you touched on that point. There isn't necessarily a wide appreciation or respect for apprenticeships on the continent. So what could we use from these tools to help address this gap and market vocational education in a positive way?
Thank you, Nasrin. Again, number one is to ensure that we have the vocational qualifications or the technical certificate in terms of the vocational training. Number two, we have the national qualifications that each country is developing, and every country is developing. For example, in the African continent, the African Union is involved in developing the African Continent Qualification Council. Then the apprenticeship systems should be able to cover the core skills, in which competence skills are most important. Then coming up to the industry, the employment rights and responsibilities of the employer and the vocational schools. Lastly, we must have clear frameworks from the government, from the industry, and the funding or development partners to ensure that it's accurate and done in a very good way. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Very well summarized, and definitely alignment on policy, but also the funding, the access to resources is key, but the recognition of the qualification to allow mobility is so important. And that's where the qualifications frameworks and the recognition of the qualifications becomes critical, particularly in our context as a South African. I understand the challenges on the continent, and we know that we have a lot of work to do, and the tools can help us. Ashwani, if I could come to you, what for you would be the most effective way to create improved opportunities for social dialogue to ensure quality and improved apprenticeship and vocational education delivery?
Thank you, Nazreen. This is a core issue. I think it needs to be addressed by all the countries for having a good apprenticeship system. typically, sometimes I call it my approach as a AC model, ACII. Basically, it has 4 components to me. First is most important is creating awareness of benefits of apprenticeships, as well as the publicizing the rules and procedures for implementing apprenticeships with social partners. Social partners means employers and workers and apprentices. In this case, apprentices also. Many times they are not very well aware of the benefits, how it benefits them. But then not only benefits, providing evidence. So that means one has to be back up with the research on that one and then explaining them. Next one is also important, supporting and developing the capacity of social partners. I'm using social partners. In the ILO, we use the term for employers and workers together. Sometimes we presume they will know because they are the employers, organizations, or companies. They know everything. It's not necessarily. So they may not have the prior experience of on apprenticeship in many countries. So they need capacity building. Then next one is establishing an effective institutional framework and governance model that brings social partners together, means government, employers and workers together and other stakeholders, and facilitate the social dialogue. But that mechanism is very important. Some countries, it's very effective models are there. For example, South Africa has a NEDLAC model. Some other countries have different models are there. Okay, NEDLAC is at a macro level, but then you need that kind of a model, not only at the macro level, but you also need at the meso level also. So that at a meso level, companies can have the dialogue with the counterparts, with vet providers, and other local stakeholders also. Sometimes the dialogue takes place only at the strategy policy level. So then it becomes too macro. But the real action takes place at the company level and the training provider level. If there is no effective coordination between them, training cannot be effective also. And then sometimes it's on the policy making. I'm saying as implementation is also very important so that ownership takes place. And most importantly, government and social partners both and other stakeholders have to consider that social dialogue is core and indispensable. It's not just add-on something, it's a core of this process because that's what it brings different stakeholders together. So when this is ingrained into the minds of everyone in the policy making and the policymakers in the government and other social partners, then they will take it really seriously. And along with that also goes is the trust. Trust is the most important, trusting each other. Most of the social dialogues also fail because we start with a mistrust. That we also try to find meanings between words, why someone has said this one, what it could mean, what the intentions could be. We have to go with the positive and trust each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwani. I think you've summarized that so well. And the issue of trust in social dialogue, the issue of trust in shaping systems is paramount to ensure the success of the system, along with all of the other areas that you pointed out. So we appreciate your input. Tim, if we can get your insights on how students can work with policymakers. We've talked a lot about how private sector partners can work with policymakers, but how can students work with policymakers to engage on how technology is used for training? But we also need to understand the issue of accessibility, the digital divide, and privacy. The digital space has opened up a whole new set of issues around access to information and privacy. And what are your thoughts on that in the context of the tool, as well as your work within the Commission?
Well, that's of course a very big topic. I think what the tool does and what really goes in the right direction is to include students actively, to see the students not only as the receivers of some policy decisions that are made elsewhere, but really to make them heard, because in the end it's the students that should be at the focus of the attention. Whatever is decided in terms of digitalization of vet systems, we should also listen to the students. And therefore, I think if you start on a micro level, like the tool suggests, then it's really the best way for students to make a difference. Because I also think that when it comes to digitalization, there is a lot of willingness from policymakers to really go ahead and to really make changes. But the problem is then very often at the micro level, procedures have to be changed, mindsets have to be changed of teachers, of trainers, of school leaders. And there I think that students can be change agents because they are so familiar with these new digital technologies that they can also push on a micro level really to better make use of it and also to cooperate with the teachers, with the trainers to make the best use of it. And then when it comes to influencing policy making, of course, this is much more difficult, I would say. But then in the end, I think, again, it's really not about raising awareness of policymakers. I think really across the board, everyone understands that the digital transformation is absolutely key and that young people who are following a VET training program today, they really need to learn advanced digital skills. Otherwise, they will have enormous difficulties on the labor market of the future. So I think it's really more about implementation, and there on the micro level, learners and students can really make a big difference.
So well framed, Tim. Thank you for that. I think it's nice to hear you talk about the role of students in being change agents, in having the opportunity to engage and to influence and to teach. We've seen a lot of talk recently about reverse mentorship, and I think this is one space where this generation can help the rest of us adapt to digital transformations at a much faster pace. So thank you for sharing that. And then Chris, finally, how can countries address the needs, the skills needs for the future through the tool? I think the important thing of all these tools is they need to be actively working in the current, but they also need to support systems that adapt to the future demands and the changing labor market and changing education system needs. So how can the tool do that?
Well, I guess one of the things about when we talk about the future and future skill needs is there's lots of discussion on specific things like a specific type of technology or big changes that are happening. But actually, changes happen all the time. And the big thing that helps you prepare for the future is to have a system that's able to respond to the future. So how quickly can your system respond to changes is one of the big things that's really it helps you prepare for the future. And I guess that's what our tool, the tool that we've talked about, but also the other tools give you examples of how organizations and policymakers can help the system prepare for the future and adapt. And the second thing really is about the tool is about engagement. And I mean, Ashwani said it very eloquently. It's about that engagement with social partners who have a better knowledge of what's going on. We all know more when we come together and share our knowledge. And the important parts of our tool and all the other tools is bringing people together to understand. And one of the key findings from our work was that actually people didn't even understand what their role in the model in their system was. Even though it was set down, they didn't really understand or know that they had that role. So that's a really important finding. And then finally, there's also the future can also be some indication of the past, and we haven't mentioned COVID at all. But actually, even those systems that have been quite mature and have been involved a long time, COVID may have identified weaknesses, particularly given the scale and speed of change that has happened over the last 18 months, 2 years. So again, that is a way of testing your system and using these tools to go back and check, has your system been able to respond quickly to the changes?
Absolutely. I think the need for agile systems, the need for systems that have built an element of flexibility into the delivery of learning, the modalities of learning, the way that policy can adapt. And it was amazing for me, we're now talking about COVID, but how rapidly countries developed policies and implemented it, within a matter of weeks. We've never seen that in the education space. It takes us years to get agreement on policy frameworks. So it was good to see that it can happen. And I like what you're saying about, the tool was future-proofing these systems so that even if you don't have all of the answers now, the elements of the system are there to adapt. So thanks for that, Chris. So we're almost at the end of our session. We've heard some very, very practical insights from the three tools, our speakers. We've also seen from Peter's perspective how the tools can be applied to a country context. And for me, I think this was probably a really good way to round out the discussions over the last week in this track. So thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you very much to the audience. It's been interesting to see and to learn from you. The tools will be made available on the conference website, so please keep an eye on them and Google the different organizations and their tools. Use them. I, for example, have answered all 200 plus questions in the British Council tool. We worked closely with Ashwani on the development of the toolkit for volume 2. And we're looking forward to taking the Selfie tool into the GAN networks because they are so useful and easy to deploy. On that note, I want to thank all of our speakers and the conference coalition partners for all of their work in developing this stream, developing the content, the questions, the identifying the speakers. We will conclude tomorrow, and we invite you all to the closing plenary session and the panel discussion. There will also be a virtual museum tour, and we will also be looking forward to 2022 when the competition will happen in person, and we will continue with the conference discussion. So very exciting things coming up tomorrow. And with that, thank you all for your time, and we will see you all soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Tim. Bye-bye, Peter.
Bye.
Thanks, Chris, Ashwani.
Bye.
And thanks to the WorldSkills team. Bye.